So, Francis, what year did you start working for the City of Prineville, and how did that job come about?
I started to work in April of 1951 on a temporary basis. I had previously worked for 10 years for the Ochoco Lumber Company, and the manager of the company, Stuart Shelk, also happened to be chairman of the Finance Committee for the City Council. And I was not working at that time, so he asked me if I would go down and stay for a while to straighten things out at the City Hall after the other fellow had left without notice. Well, I said yes. As it turned out, it lasted for 18 years. But many, many interesting events happened in the meantime.
You started working for the city, and what was your title when you first started working?
My title was City Recorder, and incidentally, that made me the first and the only woman recorder in the city of Prineville from 1880, when the city was incorporated, until 1884.
And you were city recorder, but that was actually an elected position, right, in the beginning?
No, it was appointed by the city council.
Okay, okay.
As there was also a city treasurer who was completely separate.
And what year were you asked to combine the city treasurer with the city recorder?
That was in 1954 at the 1954 election, after the city had decided it was a more efficient way to conduct business.
And what did you think about that? Did you think
Oh,
that was way too much?
Made little difference to me because we had been taking care of the business anyway. The treasurer's job was just sort of in name only.
And so you became treasurer and city recorder.
Yes.
Did you ever have to be elected to that, or was that
No,
still
it was
appointed?
always appointed by the city council.
And at what year did the city recorder position become a staff position?
I'm not sure whether you call it staff or not, but in 1968 the charter was changed to change the type of corporation that the city was from a mayor council to a city administrator. And at that time, a man assumed the duties of the city recorder in 68.
How would you say, when you were city recorder and treasurer, the operation of the city was different than it is now?
There's hardly any way to begin to say. At that time, the City Hall was an old barracks building left over from World War II. But the City of Prineville Railway was starting to make money, and actually the city was beginning to wake up. When I moved here in 1940, there were only 18 miles of paved road in the county from Redmond to Prineville. And in 1950, all the side streets like 4th Street and 2nd Street were all dirt, and all the residential streets. But after the war, the lumber mills started to really operate, and of course the railroad prospered and was able to give the money into the general fund to build a new city hall, the city parks, and the swimming pool, which now, in 2016, badly needs replacing.
So timber was the driving for the whole city.
It certainly was. That was the time when all of the big mills had moved into Prineville, beginning in about 39-40.
And that's how the city was able to do the infrastructure improvements you just talked about in terms of streets and all of that.
That's very true. There was a picture in the paper showing when C.C. McGlenn, who was the manager of the railroad, turned over the first $1 million check to me as the city treasurer from the railroad.
And that was what year?
I cannot tell you. I cannot remember exactly.
That's
But it was a sort of a strange coincidence that being city recorder treasurer also made me treasurer of the railroad, which was, I think, somewhat different.
So obviously you knew all the finances of what the
No,
city-
I had nothing to do with the actual financial work at the railroad. That was purely because I was named treasurer.
How would you say now in 2016, the city, the operation of the city, is different than it was back then?
Well, for one thing, I don't know how many employees there are in the city hall. Maybe 20. At that time, when I went to work there was 2. Me and a very, very nice, lovely girl named Patsy Berry, who helped me when I first went in there.
So there were 2 people working for the city of
2.
Prineville back
In that office,
in
yes.
that office. Okay. So anybody who did like city public works and all of that, that was contracted out separately?
Oh, no, 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 no. Oh, no. This city council, that was what they call a mayor council, and each one of the councilmen was in charge of a certain department, such as police department, sewer department, or street department. And they were kind of the boss of the works. Well, they were workmen, but they reported to this councilman.
So each of those separate departments reported to a specific counselor.
Yeah, that's true.
Were there 7? Do you recall if there were 7 counselors back?
No, there were 6 plus the mayor.
So, 6 plus 1, 7. Yeah, so that made sense. That made sense.
Mm-hmm.
And from your perspective, now that timber is not as big as it was, we still have timber. We have Les Schwab tires and so forth. As you've watched the economic changes within the city, what are your impressions now?
Well, I'm very pleased to report that finally, after many years, apparently the railway is coming back to life. There was a time when it was what you might call mortally dead, almost. During the time I was there, it was very prosperous. In fact, there was a time for about 5 years where we were able to operate only on railroad income, plus allotments from the state. No taxes were levied.
Was there a time when there was a passenger component of the railroad?
Oh, definitely. When it was first opened in 1918, there was a passenger car which ran from Prineville to Prineville Junction, which is about 4 miles north of Redmond, and it was very, very well patronized as a passenger line.
Did you take it yourself?
Well, in 1918, not quite. You remember why? I was only a year old.
Oh. That makes sense.
And I wasn't living here.
Oh, right. Did you ever have a chance to ride the railroad?
Oh, definitely. Oh, yes. In fact, they spoiled me and let me ride in the engine a time or two. They did have at various times passenger cars on the railroad in which they actually contracted out to some company who had 2 cars, and they ran the Crooked River Dinner Line. Mm-hmm. And eventually they sold it to the City of Prineville when it was still profitable. Then in 2002, it lost money, and so the city gave it up.
And now you're watching the whole sort of political climate, within the city and even the county, but the political climate is something that you are very interested in. How have the politics of the city and even the county changed from way back in the 40s and the 50s? Is it any different?
The politics? No, I cannot recall. Nothing that I would have paid great attention. The general politics.
Right.
Of course, there were some political interests from time to time, but
were there any scandals that you recall, back in those days?
not. If I get into that, it would be a long, long story.
Okay, we won't go into that.
I started to say during the Depression, at first the railroad was pretty profitable because it was hauling cattle and potatoes, and then the lumber mills came along and provided profit. But there was a time when it was it was bankrupt. in 1976 or 77, the railroad shipped out around 10,000 cars of lumber, and then in 2002, they shipped out 86 cars of lumber. So you can imagine the seriousness of the situation with regard to the railway.
Do you recall any funny incidences when you were working for the city? Any funny stories?
Many, many, many. Well, this one is very... I was always having to, and I didn't like it, but I had to put my name to anything that went out over from the city. And there were things that people didn't like to get, like notices for sewer liens or paving assessments and various things like that. And this one time, this huge woman came in. We had turned her payments over to the county assessor, which were added to her taxes. And she was just furious. She was practically foaming in the mouth. She was an older woman from the south, and she stood there and she looked me in the eye and she stuck her hands up in the air and spread out her fingers, and she said, "I'm going to put a hex on you." And I think she did. I blamed that hex for everything that's happened to me since. That was just an instance. There were lots and lots of funny things, but others not so funny.
What year were you born, Frances? I forgot.
I was born in the year 1917.
17, okay, 1917. And that makes you right now 99? 99. And when is your birthday?
June the 5th.
I'm 100?
99.
99 on June 5th. Okay.
I'm 98 now.
Are you the oldest person in Prineville?
No, there are several 100 years old here.
Oh.
But there is something interesting. I have a sister who lives in Ochico Village. She's 96, and I do believe that she and I are the oldest siblings in Prineville as far as I know.
You're very healthy for 98.
I am.
What do you attribute that to?
They've asked me that, and I really and truly can't tell you, although I have some ancestors who lived well into their 90s, so that must have had something to do with it. And the fact that I never smoked or drank or gambled or, well, anyway, clean living.
What else do you want to tell me about your time with the City of Prineville? So you started with the city in what year?
1951.
51, and you left to 61?
In 1968.
1968, 18 years.
In 1968, several things happened to make me decide to resign. One of them was the fact that my dear father had a heart attack, and I was very, very concerned about him. Another thing was that I had, in my enthusiasm for the history of Prineville, I had talked to the city council, and they gave me $3,000 to start a Prineville centennial celebration. Well, in my enthusiasm, instead of relegating it to weeks or months, I decided it should be all summer. Well, that was a really, really grueling undertaking that took all the strength I had. Besides, I was working against various factions, and then other smalls. Oh, there was something else. They were passing a charter amendment to bring in a city administrator, which was badly needed. The city was growing so fast. Knowing myself, I thought, now that might not work so well for me to work with somebody else. And so all of those things combined convinced me that my time was over.
And the centennial was a 100-year celebration? That's
of the settlement of Prineville by Barney Prine.
And what did you do as part of that centennial?
I was the chairman, and it was a wonderful celebration. First thing we did, and it was all done with this first $3,000 donations and donated labor and material. We built a little town on the corner across Elm Street from Pioneer Park, where Chase Bank is. I had a saloon there. We had a theater. We had several buildings. And John Sharp set up a blacksmith shop, and he actually shoed horses there. It was really, really authentic town, and all people dressed up in old-fashioned clothing, and we had any number of events. It was really, really an outstanding celebration.
So that was the summer of 1968.
But it took everything I had out of me because, for various reasons, we had hired a man from Portland who was a promoter, and he and I did not agree at all about the way things were going because he wanted profit out of it to him first, and I wanted the celebration first, and it didn't work. All of those things put together convinced me that I was tired, and so I quit.
But the celebration went well.
Oh, the celebration went well. At the end of it, we had a big pageant down at the fairgrounds. It was really something. They even built a railroad and brought in a handcar. It was really a spectacular event. And I run across people even now who remember having seen it and remember it.